Hi, I'm Cheryl Kagan, very proud to be the Senator for Gaithersburg and Rockville. Welcome to this week's edition of Kibbitzing with Kagan, brief conversations with people I find fascinating. Peter Kirchgraber is a national expert on nonprofits. He has been in the field, he has worked at Maryland nonprofits, and now he's on the senior staff of National Council of Nonprofits. Peter, thank you so much for making time to chat today.
Senator Kagan, thanks so much for having me. It's really a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you. So it has been my honor to get to work with you and so many other nonprofit leaders. One of the highest compliments I ever get is when people call me the senator for the nonprofit sector. So we're going to cover a lot of ground here in a brief period of time. But first, we're going to start with your background. I think your education is so interesting. You got a bachelor in history and German, a
Yep.
master's in European history at Cornell, a law degree from William and Mary. A lot of times, I remember in junior high school, back when it was junior high school, when we were taking algebra, we'd say, are we ever going to use any of this stuff when we grow up? Do you use any of that? Do you use European history or German on a day-to-day basis? How has that informed your career?
History, absolutely. I mean, it's all about the study of how things change over time. And so I feel like it's taught me a lot about how to view the world and how to understand that the past is prologue and to really, dig deep to find the roots of things. And it can often give you revelations as to what some approaches might be for solving problems and so forth. So I use that. The German, not so much,
Not so
but
much.
I still do read it and read some novels and so forth and watch
Yeah.
some TV shows in German and stuff. Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I try to whenever I'm watching Netflix, I always have either French or Spanish subtitles on to keep up my vocabulary and stuff.
Oh,
So,
that's great. Yeah, I love it.
so you were at Maryland Nonprofits, Maryland
Yes.
Association of Nonprofits, which is such an important organization, represents and advocates for the 41,000 plus nonprofits in Maryland. You were there for almost 3 years. What did you learn about nonprofits in Maryland?
So much. So to start with, just that most nonprofits are relatively small, and that I was actually surprised to find that the vast majority of them, it's kind of like a pyramid. If you imagine a pyramid where most of them are, an inverted pyramid, most of them are at the top, you know, and those are the ones that have very few assets. And then the tiny little point that it's standing on at the bottom is like the Johns Hopkins, a handful of those that are very, very well funded, but most
Yeah.
are relatively, you know, thinly capitalized, and they do all kinds of great work in the community. And they do it on a shoestring budget, and they do it really as a labor of love frequently.
Agreed. So when I was a foundation director and helped give away over $1 million a year, I helped bring the Standards for Excellence, which is a great program run by Maryland nonprofits, brought it to some of our favorite nonprofit organizations. Why don't you talk about what that is and why it's important?
Oh, well, it's great. The Standards for Excellence program it's a national program. First of all, this is really setting the standard for nonprofit governance and for really all aspects of nonprofit management. I think the idea behind it is that nonprofits are like businesses, and you have to have the business skills that go with the ability to run a nonprofit efficiently and to actually achieve your mission. You can have all kinds of fire in the belly and a heart for the mission and so forth. But you really do need to, over time, if you're just starting without the business skills, you need to develop those. And so this is a way for organizations to, start at a place where maybe they don't know all of these things about,
Mhm.
what policies and procedures you need to have. And then they develop those over time using the templates that the Standards for Excellence Institute can provide. And all of that stuff has been vetted. It's been run through the general counsel. It's been put together by subject matter experts. I edited hundreds of pages of that material when
Yeah.
we were revising that material last year or the year before last, I guess it was now. But yeah,
And just to be clear, that covers everything from fiscal management to transparency to diversity, accountability. I mean, it's everything, right?
everything. It's everything, and it's
Everything.
it's kind of like nonprofits in a box. I mean, it gives you
Yes.
all of the materials that you need to succeed, and a lot of it you could just sort of go to the website if you're a
Yeah.
member, and you can download those materials. It saves you a lot of time And then you're not sort of poking around the internet looking for, I wonder what a good model policy might be. It's like,
Yeah.
no, we've done that work for you.
Yeah.
So
And one of the things I used to say is if a nonprofit has gone through the process and earned their seal of excellence, that's almost a good housekeeping seal of approval. No
absolutely.
wonder. It
It's
shows you're
quite difficult
serious.
to,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's not an easy thing to get that. But one of the other things that I think everyone was always at pains to say that, it's one thing to have the policies and procedures, and you absolutely need to have those, and your board
Mhm.
needs to pass those, but you've got to observe those. Those have to really be
Yes.
part of the day to day of how the nonprofit runs.
Okay, let's go to one of the things that you and I find infinitely frustrating, which is the effort to undermine nonprofits, the reputation of the nonprofit sector lately. I'm going to give a shout out, a bad shout out, to the current owners of the Baltimore Sun that have just been on this rampage. And then Donald Trump and White House and some in Congress have just been intimating that the nonprofit sector is just full of bad people who are ripping off taxpayers. Talk about what that's like, the impact that you've seen, and what's the answer? How do we combat it?
Yeah, that's boy, I wish that's a dissertation unto itself.
It is.
That's
I'm sorry.
really
Yes.
no, it's complicated, I do feel like um, the nonprofit sector really is facing unprecedented threats. It's something we've never seen before. You have federal funds that are being withheld. You have termination of contracts. You have the attempt, like with the um, well, I don't want to get into the technical stuff, but there's sort of a website that everybody has to use called sam.gov. And if you're getting federal funds, you've got to register and all the rest. So what they're doing is they're saying, if you're going to use sam.gov and get any federal money, you've got to sign on to a whole bunch of new terms and conditions. And all the terms and conditions are things that, the current administration is not fond of. They've also gone ahead and tried to change the rules on the public service loan forgiveness program. There have been threats to withhold funds in jurisdictions that are labeled as sanctuary jurisdictions, and a lot of that stuff. Yeah, so it's a lot.
Let's pivot though from the national level to Maryland because I don't have a magic wand to fix the White House, sadly.
Yes.
But again, they've been focused on causing legislators to doubt the sanctity and the importance of the nonprofit sector in Maryland. Talk about that. What are these attacks? What's legit? Is there anything in it that's fair? And what do they get wrong?
Well, I would say that, as with any human endeavor, you get the run of humanity in every profession, and there's always the possibility that in some nonprofit something goes sideways, and
Right.
that, you get somebody who's, stealing money from the till. That is very much the exception, as is true of the banking system and
Yep.
business generally and so forth. That's the exception, and those things get caught out. And I think from NCN standpoint, and I'm sure that
National Council of
oh
Nonprofits.
yes, National Council of Nonprofits,
Uh-huh.
and I'm sure Maryland nonprofits and every other nonprofit organization would feel the same way that nobody wants um, organizations to be ripping off the public, and that is something we stand foursquare against. We are all
Yes.
for transparency. We
Yes.
are all for making sure that nonprofits are living up to those standards of excellence, that they are models of transparency, that they set the standard that we would like to see observed everywhere. So.
Agreed. Agreed. We're I'm looking at my pages of questions here. Nonprofits, before we continue on, give an idea of the range of what is a nonprofit organization and why is it important that they are called nonprofits, one word, no hyphen, in Maryland law, and not for profits or any other moniker.
Well, starting with the last question, it's just really important for people to be able to have unified terminology, have kind of a common shared vocabulary for things.
Yep.
It makes it easier, just from my standpoint, when I'm researching legislation across the 50 states. You have to look for several more search terms: nonprofit, not for profit, charitable organization, charitable institution, eleemosynary organization, like all of these different terms.
Yep.
It's so much easier if it's just, all right, everybody knows what this is. And not everybody necessarily is going to know that, what is a nonprofit and what isn't, because, as everybody likes to observe, it's only a tax status, but it's a
Mhm.
significant tax status. But what it is really all these organizations that are improving the quality of life. They, feed people, they provide shelter, childcare, youth sports, arts programs, and people have so many contacts on a day-to-day basis with nonprofit organizations. If there's some organization that's looking for a cure for a dread disease, those are typically nonprofits and 501c3s. Disaster recovery, veteran services, it's all manner of really good works happening under that mantle.
So I talk about how it's in every nook and cranny. It's not in just red district, Republican, or just blue districts where it's more Democratic. It's everywhere. And you gave so many great examples. So I'm going to skip to where I wasn't going to go right yet, but let's talk about the Johnson Amendment. You and I worked closely
Yes, indeed.
on that. So Senate Bill 4. And
Senate Bill 4.
anything that has a bill number below 10, it means the president really cares about this. And this was a Kagan-Ferguson bill. President Ferguson and was kind enough to co-sponsor and support the bill. Briefly, what's the
Yes.
Johnson Amendment and why are we in such a mess right now?
Yes, so that's the Johnson Amendment is something that is named. It's not named for the current Speaker of the House. This causes a little bit of confusion.
Yeah.
Confusion. It's actually Lyndon Baines Johnson from back
Yep.
when he was in the Senate. He was Senator Lyndon Baines Johnson of Texas, and in 1954 he was on the floor of the Senate and he proposed. He said, "Well, listen, if you're going to be a 501c3, if you're going to be one of these
Nonprofit.
nonprofits, a charitable nonprofit, where you're allowed to tell your donors that they can deduct their donations for your good works. Then the quid pro quo here, the trade is that you've got to stay out of partisan politics.
Right.
And a lot of people looked at that and said, well, of course, that should be an easy one, really,
Right.
because what you don't want is you don't want public money going to subsidize private, self-interested political speech.
Right.
So that's a big part of that. And also, you don't want people to be setting up nonprofits just to kind of channel money into political campaigns, because then the real nonprofit sector would be like, wait, what about us? All this
Yeah.
money's people are getting their tax write-off without having to give to a good organization that's actually doing the work.
Right. So it has been law for 72 years. It was
Yes.
signed into law by President Eisenhower. This goes back a long time. And now there is a lot of conversation, lawsuits and remarks from the president, from Congress. Why are they looking to strip this out and let nonprofits, food pantries, battered women's shelters, homeless shelters get into partisan politics?
Yeah, I think there's a bunch of reasons. I can't speak to their exact motivations, but I could certainly speculate that what makes nonprofits, especially the 501c3s, that's the only kind of nonprofit where you get to tell your donors you get a tax write-off. I think it's a juicy target in that kind of public subsidy for political speech would be amazing. If somebody were to tell you, hey, you're going to get a tax write-off for this, you get to tell your story, and it's almost like getting your advertising subsidized, or your political opinions pumped out into the world with a government subsidy, like a public subsidy.
So Senate Bill 4, what it did is basically freeze current law in Maryland to a moment in time. So
Mhm.
if there was a court case saying, oh, nonprofits can get involved in partisan politics, or there was congressional action or an executive order, we would say in Maryland, you still stay out. You still are not
Yes.
getting involved in partisan politics. Made common sense, seemed obvious, and yet it got controversial. Talk about the influence of faith organizations, and specifically, most visibly, Black churches.
I think there was a concern. This is what we heard from folks in the hearings, is that there was concern that this was an attempt to sort of shut down political speech, and that Black churches have historically played that role
Sure.
of being the leaders in their community, and really talking about moral issues, and moral issues where the rubber meets the road on a
Mhm.
very practical level. And I think we were at pains in talking about the bill to say, this really doesn't change anything, and that this would actually protect houses of worship from that kind of political entanglement and interference that people would be concerned about.
Mhm.
If the money starts getting pumped in, and then you start having conflict within the congregation over, are you going to endorse this person or that person? And,
Right.
things are already really kind of at a crisis point in many of our societal institutions, where people are having a hard time just coming together because there are so many disagreements about things. And
Yes.
I think one of the arguments was, hey, you don't necessarily want to bring that into your church. And I understand the argument about not wanting to shut down discourse, but I think we were trying to be pretty clear that
Yes.
this would not shut down discourse. This would be the same rules as we've always had, and that wasn't going to change anything.
But my rabbi, pastor, minister uh, has always endorsed me from the pulpit. He's always told everybody, or she's always told people to vote for me. You're going to shut that down. How do we answer that? And is there another state or locality that is moving forward in a way that you think is going to pass so that we can have a model, a template legislation on this?
I'd like to
Oh, and
see a template.
ultimately, for
Yeah.
those who may not know this, SB 4, Senate Bill 4, did pass the Senate and went over to the House, but it was amended to exempt faith institutions, which really killed the bill. And so we did not pursue it in the House. Please, Peter, go ahead.
Do you want me to get into the background at all about how the IRS is getting into this, or
I
or
think that's
the
probably too much
too
right
much?
now.
Okay.
I think people can do research, but is there an avenue? Like, do the crystal ball. What goes into the future? What might happen? What's the best and worst that might happen? And is there a way to forestall it to protect our nonprofits from this?
I think it's one of those things. It's a difficult problem to solve because it's hard to explain to people, and I think it's hard to get people to focus on it before it's happened,
Yes.
because I think to some ears it sounds like, well, you're just sort of speculating about what the effects of this might be, and until you actually had those effects in front of you and could see the entire parade of horribles that are, I think, fairly foreseeable. I mean, in our view, they're pretty well foreseeable. Until you had that, it's really hard to get people's attention. There are so many other things that are crying out for attention when you look at the budgetary situation in a lot of states. And, after the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, you had,
So-called,
900 and
so-called.
so, yeah, so called. I think it was $940 billion that was taken out of Medicaid. So almost $1 trillion. And states are going to have to figure out in the coming years how to make that up. And
Well,
that
and
will affect, yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
no. So that means more stress on the nonprofit sector. What I always say is if the food pantries, homeless shelters, battered women's shelter, literacy council, blah 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 went out of business, tomorrow government would have to pick up the slack, which would be higher taxes, more government expenditures, or lack of service for those who need it most, and that's problematic.
I think
Um,
that's the big concern. Yeah, absolutely.
So, other than money, what do you think is the most important way governments support our nonprofit sectors or partner with them?
Other than money. Um, well, I mean, I think not placing regulatory burdens, like unreasonable regulatory burdens on nonprofits. And so, for example, when you look at grants and contracts, now nonprofits get a lot of government grants and contracts, and that's one of the ways that governments can provide services
Yes,
and have like a very credible presence in the community with people who are really grassroots and kind of know the community, are trusted in the community. And so the government will say, well, it's easier for us just to pay you. You already know all the players.
right.
And so they'll do that. Um, but you don't want them making it really complicated to get government money. You don't want them to put all kinds of compliance, like not reasonable compliance measures, but compliance measures that are over and above to the point that, you're the nonprofit that's running a food pantry, and yet you're spending all your time making pretty pie charts to submit and say, like, see what we're doing? We've got really nice pie charts,
Right.
rather than the actual pie
Rather
that
than
you might be
serving
serving,
pies. Right, there
rather
you
than
go.
serving pies. So, anyway, so it's that kind
So,
of thing. We want to make sure that the government, to some extent, promotes nonprofits, but also
yeah.
sort of stays out of the way of the good work.
Yes. So one of the laws that the governor just signed for the nonprofit sector, I had four bills for the nonprofit sector. Two of them moved forward and are law. The increasing the audit thresholds so that nonprofits can focus on their missions and not be filling out paperwork or paying for
Yes.
expensive audits. We hadn't updated the law in 10 years. And so now we're more in line with a bunch of other states.
Absolutely. And that's kind of where I was going with that. That's one of those things where, government can make it easier for nonprofits to function, or they can, you know, put a bunch of regulatory hurdles in the way that make it more challenging and cost, money and time that
Yeah.
nonprofits are already sort of scraping by and trying to make sure that they have enough money to, serve the needs that are actually increasing over time.
Yes.
Um, so
Um, Since I referenced the other nonprofit bill that is now has been signed into law, I have to talk about my green bill, Green and
yes,
Renewable Energy
wonderful.
Efficiency for
Yep.
nonprofit organizations. And for those watching, it's very exciting. A nonprofit only has to show up with 10% of the cost. A revolving loan fund, interest free. Revolving loan fund is going to pay 90% of you putting on a green, a solar panel or upgrading your insulation or something to reduce your carbon footprint and reduce your energy bills. So that was in the Utility Relief Act and is now has been signed into law. Anything you want to say about that?
Well, first off, congratulations, because that is a brilliant bill, and
Thank
we're
you.
really very, very happy to see that go through. And
Five
it's an
years. 5 years the
5
Senate
years.
passed
Yeah,
it.
I mean it's a very long game, and but
Yes.
you've continued year after year after year to persist until it went through, and I feel like this is an example of sort of a larger point I wanted to make is just that um, nonprofits often are not treated like small businesses.
Yes.
It's like you are basically running a business when you're running a
Mhm.
nonprofit. It's like you
Mhm.
have to make payroll, you have to have insurance, you have to keep the lights on. It's like all of that stuff, and you know what we're advocating for very often is just parity, saying, these
Yes.
are very much, they're similarly situated in a lot of ways to small businesses. So we're just asking for similar treatment,
Yes.
um, that respects the differences between the two sectors, but that also says we're not going to put additional roadblocks in the way. And hey, by the way, when we have a really good program that's promoting small businesses, we'd like to cut nonprofits in on that because nonprofits, I will say, we are job creators, and 10% of the civilian workforce in the U.S. The 2022 statistic said it was 9.9. I don't know what it is right now. That
In
was the most
Maryland, it's
recent stat.
higher.
Yeah, and in
Yes.
Maryland it is higher, but
Yes.
nationally it's almost 10%, which is huge, and it's
Yes.
even bigger in some states, as you said. Yeah.
Yes. So you and I did not rehearse this, but you have just referenced two of the bills that I've passed in years past. So I'm just going to talk about prompt payment parity.
Yes.
During COVID, we passed a law that said let's pay back our small businesses really quickly for a grant or contract. And I said, and nonprofits. Literally in some of these, I just want to amend in two words. They didn't want to do it. They wanted to get it through for the small business sector. So the next year, I said, if they get it, then nonprofits get it too. And so, literally, a woman was trying to make payroll and wasn't getting paid back fast enough, which is why I'm really proud of NIMBL, the
Yes.
nonprofit interest-free micro bridge loan. When again, these small nonprofits can get up to $25,000 interest-free, low bar to entry if government has been delayed in paying. And it has just been a lifesaver for so many of the smaller nonprofits.
It's
So,
wonderful. I have to say, before I joined Maryland Nonprofits, I was talking to a friend of mine in the foundation world, somebody I've known for 30 years.
yeah,
And she said, "Do you know about NIMBL?" She was
I
very
love that.
excited. She's very excited. And I said, "Yes, I do." I said, "I'm really excited." I said, "I'm going to work for the NIMBL place." I said, Maryland Nonprofits was instrumental in working with Senator Kagan on this. So, like, you know, I was very psyched that she knew. And, she was very psyched that I was going to a place where they had worked with you on that.
I love it. I want word to get out. We got another $1 million a couple of years ago so that there was no waiting period because at some point word got out, there was going to be a delay. And I was like, okay, if this is going to be a nimble program, we got to make sure
Yes,
it goes fast.
absolutely.
So, Peter, now you have a national perspective and you can help spread the word of what we're doing in Maryland to other states. What have we not done in Maryland that you think is really awesome that some other state or states has done? Do you have any suggestions, any ideas you
Um,
want to share?
Okay, so there was a bill in California last year, Assembly Bill 1318, where they basically said, and this was, targeted at specific programs, but they said if your state funding is keyed to your nonprofit status, even if the feds go after your nonprofit status, you can still have California nonprofit status that will be sufficient to allow you to get this state funding. And it may actually be a form of federal pass-through funding. I don't remember the exact details, but the idea was just that we will have an alternative basis for looking at your nonprofit status so that even if the feds, for some reason, and there have been some threats to go after politically disfavored nonprofits, and so I think people are rightfully concerned about this. They'd like to have a mechanism to say, well, states' rights, if you believe in that, that states should have the ability to say through their charities registration office or Secretary of State or whoever it is, this qualifies in our state as a nonprofit. That's our decision, and we made it, and we're sticking to it, and they get funded, and it's all okay, and they still keep their tax exemption, even if there's been some political weaponization
Yes.
of nonprofit tax status,
I
tax
will
exempt
look into
status.
that. Okay, thank you.
Yep,
So I have to brag about Nonprofit Navigator, first of its
absolutely,
kind
yes.
in the
Well,
country.
deservedly so. Go ahead.
Thank you. We have a wonderful person in the job. It's a new position. It is literally one human being in all of state government to help 41,000 plus nonprofits get their grants, to review the grant applications, to give feedback, to help them get their money if it hasn't been paid back yet. It's just, she's doing a great job, and I'm hoping other states are paying attention to that because it's a cool idea.
I hope so too. I actually feel like this is yet another place where Maryland is leading the way. We would love to see more of this, and I think our dream is to see all of the good bills kind of Johnny Appleseeded across the country, so that they're planted in other jurisdictions, and
Yes.
that other organizations pick this up and say, "Hey, that's a great idea. We want to run with that. We're heading directly to Led's Council and getting somebody to draw this up so that it fits into our legal system in our state."
Hope so. So we're all going to be able to cross-pollinate with through the National Council of State Legislatures, because we're all going to be together and swapping ideas. And
Yes.
National Council of Nonprofits has done a great job creating a grid of sort of the greatest hits, and you can go through it and hear about what they're doing in Montana or Mississippi or Connecticut or Maryland and come up with ideas. So it's very exciting, and you guys are providing such important resources, and that's your job now.
Well, I have to say, right back at you, because this is really, I want to make it clear that this started because of your initiative, that you're the one who started this project that's now the National Nonprofit Caucus of State Legislators. And it's a really important idea just for people to be able to get together and say, huh, we share something. We recognize the value of all these nonprofits and the work that they do in our communities. And we want to find ways to not only not stand in the way, but actually actively promote the work of nonprofits. And so sharing ideas, talking about shared pain points. How did you deal with this? Like,
Yeah.
we've got this problem in our state, and I guarantee somebody else will say, "Yep, we've got the same thing," and here's how we're dealing with that. So,
Yes.
just I think the ability to tap into the hive mind is incredibly valuable. So, I just want to say hats off to you for starting this, and we are very happy to be working with you on this. This is a really important project
You're
for us,
kind. Thank you
especially.
so much.
Yeah.
So I do have more questions, but I also want to start to wrap up a little bit.
Okay.
So coalition building, your whole career, you've done a lot of that. Tell us in these divisive times, what are a couple of tips for bringing people together who don't agree?
Um, I feel like there's a widespread agreement, that, maybe when people are talking about it in political terms, it gets very polarized very fast. But when you focus on the mission or the end result,
Hmm.
I often find that, like, yeah, people will say, gosh, I don't want people to go hungry either. It doesn't matter like what side of the aisle you're on. They'll say, like,
Yes.
well, Meals on Wheels helped my great grandmother, or
Hmm.
whatever the organization is, or youth sports, that's fantastic. We all agree on that.
Hmm.
Or arts programs. And I think when people kind of get focused on the mission and the benefits to the community, the benefits to society, a lot of times that other stuff can sort of melt away. They feel like, hey, this person's all right. We really have a lot in common. We have more in common than maybe separates us. We agree on so many things, really, and
Yes.
there may be some significant areas of difference, but we don't need to get into that to drive for Meals on Wheels, for example, or
Yes.
to be a baseball coach or whatever it is.
Yes, yes. I'm going to be accompanying a Meals on Wheels volunteer in the coming weeks, and I'm
Oh,
really looking
wonderful.
forward to it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I was
Um,
I was lucky enough to be on their board for 4 years, and it's a wonderful organization. I think the world of it. Great,
I've
great
always
place.
known of it, but I'm looking forward to seeing it live and in person.
Yep.
So, other than Meals on Wheels, since we've already given them a shout out, who's a shero or hero in the nonprofit sector? Someone you think has just been amazing, someone on the ground, either in Maryland or anywhere around the country or internationally.
Wow. Well, one is certainly Amy Coates Madsen at Maryland Nonprofits. Like 30 years ago, she created the Standards for Excellence program,
Right.
and it has just built and gone from really from success to success, from
Yeah.
strength to strength. And so it's a national program, and it sort of sets the standard and says, you know, this is what you need to meet. You really,
Right.
if you want to be a nonprofit that is checking all the boxes and doing everything by the book. This is one way to make sure that you've got the business skills, you've got all the policies and procedures, your governance practices are all completely up to scratch. She's done a wonderful job with that over the years, and I think it's a program they are justifiably proud of.
Absolutely. I'm looking at needing to toss some of my questions here. Uh,
Right.
your your history background, does it make you more or less um, optimistic, pessimistic in our current times?
Um,
How does it frame your reaction to the life we're living now?
I would say, having studied propaganda and mass consensus building, the crisis and dissolution of the Weimar Republic, I
Yes.
feel at times like I've seen this movie before, and that does not bode well. On the other hand, I also feel like there's the possibility for people to come together and recognize that, you know, there are larger things at stake here than just partisanship, and that there are shared interests in keeping this 250-year-old experiment going, and
Yes.
to making sure that it's robust and survives into the next 250 years.
Right.
So yeah,
Okay.
it, it it's kind of a mixed bag. I have to say that's really a bad answer, but it's a
Yes.
mixed bag for me.
That's about what I might have predicted. And the Weimar Republic, just to be clear, was Germany in the time of Nazism and Hitler. What is something you wish you had known early in your career that you know now?
Wow, what I wish I'd known. Oh, probably that's a long catalog of things, but wow. Uh, I don't know where to begin, actually. That's
Okay.
uh,
All right.
all
I'm
right.
not trying to stump you
Yep.
here. That's all right. Okay. Totally. The last question before we go to our fast five. You are especially connected to autism.
Yes.
And and can you tell us how that is and why? And what's a tip for dealing with someone who's along the spectrum to help us communicate or have a relationship that could be better?
Oh, absolutely. I think, and to answer your last question first, I would say just know that, as a lot of people say, when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism,
Right.
and that everybody uh, on autism, everyone on the autism spectrum, I guess, is as different as everybody else is in the neurotypical world. And so it's just maybe an issue of not making assumptions because you've met another person who presented in a certain way, that everybody's going to be sort of following that same pattern. I'm connected to it because my son Noah, my older son, is on the autism spectrum, and he's a wonderful guy. He is one of the two lights of our life. Noah and Aiden, we have two sons. Lisa and I have two sons,
Mhm.
and we feel very fortunate to have a son who is he's just a wonderful guy. He sits there, watching TV news. He's very engaged in politics, and he has a very deeply ingrained sense of what's fair and unfair. And he'll be sort of arguing with what they're presenting on the news. Well, that's outrageous. How did they even get away with that? And I feel like, well, good for you. You
Yeah.
care about this. You have a really deep sense of right and wrong, and I feel like that's great to see. And my other son is neurotypical, and his life path is taking him to a graduate program in public policy that's going to use his science background to do public policy on environmental
Nice.
science. So,
Nice. Fantastic. All right, Peter Kirchgraber. Let's see. I have to hold up this button, which I meant to do
I
earlier.
love it. Yeah,
I
yeah,
heart nonprofits. And
yep.
all right. So, Peter Kirchgraber with the National Council of Nonprofits, formerly with Maryland Nonprofits. It is time for the Fast Five. Five quick questions, five quick answers. Uh, Question number one. You are a big reader in your spare time, in your free time. What is a book that you've read recently that has kind of stayed with you?
Um, wow. Many. There's one that I'm reading right now that I absolutely love, and it's the fifth novel in Paul Scott's Jewel in the Crown series about India. So, Jewel in the Crown is like four books back to back, and then this one is sort of the last of the series that takes a peripheral character and his wife, and they sort of talk about their story staying on in India. after 1947, after partition. And it's a brilliant story. It's beautifully told. Um,
Fiction or
I've been
historical nonfiction?
historical nonfiction, but
Historical fiction.
very
Yeah.
like well. I mean, this guy who wrote it, Paul Scott, was
Yeah.
steeped in that period, so he
Nice.
really gets the history right.
Cool. Question number two. How do you stay healthy and fit?
I love going to the gym. I don't get there nearly often enough. I'm commuting down to DC a couple days a week, so that means, it kicks it to like, one night a week and maybe the weekend. But
Okay.
that I really enjoy, though. That's wonderful when I get to do it and love
Good.
to do more of that.
Question number three. What is your guilty snack food pleasure?
Hmm. Um, I guess I probably can't name the brand, but a certain chocolate ice cream that is one of those premier brand, premium brands, I should say, that
Oh,
it's
I
ridiculously
totally
expensive, but it's ridiculously good.
name names.
Uh, oh, now I'm blanking on the name of it.
Okay, that's all right.
Anyway, sorry.
Okay. Question number four. As a historian, if there was an event in history, if you could time travel, where would you want to see? What would you want to experience and why?
Um, I think I'd want to go to the Renaissance, to Renaissance Italy, and I'd want to meet Da Vinci. Um, I mean,
Cool.
that's just. I went to a wonderful exhibition on Da Vinci in Toronto one time, and I just like wandered through there, completely spellbound
Yeah.
by pictures of his inventions and so forth. That like a helicopter, 300 years before the helicopter was invented, and all kinds of other things where you're like, God, what a dazzling imagination that guy had.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good choice. Question number five. Peter Kirchgraber, National Council of Nonprofits. What is your hidden secret superpower? What's a skill or talent you have, something you're really good at that most folks can't do?
Uh, well, meeting, greeting, and schmoozing is one. I'd say baking is another. I love baking. That's a big relaxing thing for me. And playing music.
Love. All right, next time I see you, I want baked goods. I might
There,
have to, out of respect for you, I just might have to
that's
sample.
right. That's right.
Okay.
You got to do some destructive testing.
Exactly, exactly. Peter, thank you for what you do. Thank you for being an amazing thought partner and advocate with me and with so many around the country. It's really been a joy getting to know you. And thank you for making time to kibitz today.
Such a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. Great to talk to you.
You too. See you soon,
Take
I
care.
hope. Take
See you.
care.
All
Bye.
right. Likewise. Bye.